I lost everything 6 months ago, my business collapsed, my wife left, and the bank took the last thing, I still called mine. At my lowest point, people didn't help me, they laughed, my own family said, I had become a burden, they thought my life was over. I stayed quiet, because there was one thing, they didn't know. 3 weeks later, a lawyer called me, and everything changed. My name is Daniel Whitmore, I'm 63 years old, and if there's one thing life has taught me, it's this: people don't reveal who they are when you're strong, they reveal who they are when you fall. 6 months before I inherited a single dollar, I had lost almost everything I spent my life building. For more than 20 years, I owned a small home renovation company just outside Columbus. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. My crews fixed kitchens, rebuilt porches, renovated basements, and repaired storm damage for families who needed someone reliable. I wasn't rich, but I was respected. For a long time, that was enough. Then the economy shifted, 2 major clients backed out, and one contractor I trusted disappeared with a large payment we had already advanced on materials. Within 4 months, I went from juggling jobs and payroll to borrowing against my own assets just to keep the lights on. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd recover, that hard work would fix it the way it always had before. But sometimes life doesn't break all at once, sometimes it breaks piece by piece, quietly, until one morning you wake up and realize there's almost nothing left. That's what happened to me. The company failed first, then came the lawsuits over unfinished work I could no longer afford to complete, then the bank froze my accounts, then my wife, Sandra, sat across from me at the kitchen table, folded her hands, and said something I'll never forget: I didn't sign up to drown with you, Daniel. That was her exact sentence. No anger, no tears, just cold honesty. 27 years of marriage, reduced to a line that sounded like it belonged in a contract. She moved out 2 weeks later. The house followed not long after. I tried to save it, but the numbers didn't care how many memories lived in those walls. A man can spend 30 years building a life and lose it in less than 6 months, and when I did, I found out very quickly who was watching. And who was waiting. My younger brother, Michael, was the first to call, not to help, to ask questions. So what happens now? He said, almost too casually, what do you mean? With the house? The truck? Your tools? You selling everything? He asked it the same way someone might ask about weather. I should have recognized the tone right then. It wasn't concern, it was interest. My sister Karen was worse. She came by the apartment I had rented after the foreclosure, a small 1-bedroom above an old insurance office, and spent less than 5 minutes pretending to care. Then she looked around at the cracked linoleum floor, the cheap blinds, and the folding table I was using as a desk, and she laughed, actually laughed. Well, she said, I guess life humbles everybody eventually. I remember that sentence because of how quietly she said it, as if cruelty somehow sounded softer when spoken politely. I didn't respond. There are moments in life when dignity is the only thing a man has left, and I wasn't going to give her mine too. The truth is, by then I was exhausted, too tired to argue, too ashamed to defend myself. For the first time since I was a teenager, I had nothing anyone wanted. No house, no business, no status, no wife, and once those things disappear, you learn how many people only loved the life around you, not the man inside it. Even my son, Eric, kept his distance. He didn't mock me like Michael or Karen did, but he also didn't call much. Maybe he didn't know what to say. Maybe he was embarrassed. Maybe both. I don't blame him for that anymore, but at the time, silence felt a lot like abandonment. 3 weeks after Sandra left, my family gathered for my Aunt Louise's 78th birthday. I almost didn't go, but Louise had always been kind to me. She was my father's younger sister, never married, sharp as a blade, and wealthier than anyone in the family ever admitted out loud. She lived simply, drove an old sedan, wore the same pearl earrings for 20 years. And let everyone assume she was just another elderly widow with a neat little condo and too many books. Most people underestimated Louise. That was their first mistake. She invited all of us to dinner at a private room in a small Italian restaurant downtown. I arrived late because my truck, the one thing the bank hadn't taken yet, refused to start on the first try. When I walked in, the whole table went quiet for half a second. That was all it took. I saw the looks, Michael's smug half smile, Karen's pity disguised as politeness. Sandra wasn't there, obviously, but somehow her absence felt like another chair at the table. Louise looked up at me and smiled warmly. "Daniel," she said. "Sit next to me." I did, and for most of the evening, I said very little. That was fine by me. The others filled the silence easily enough. Michael talked about a property investment he was considering. Karen discussed a cruise she wanted to take in the spring. Eric mentioned work. Everyone carefully avoided asking how I was doing for exactly 20 minutes. Then Michael finally did it. He lifted his glass and said, "Well, I suppose one good thing about rock bottom is there's nowhere left to fall." Karen laughed first, then Michael laughed, and a few seconds later, even Eric smiled awkwardly, not because he thought it was funny, I think, but because people often join laughter when they don't know how to stop it. I looked down at my plate, pasta I suddenly couldn't taste. Louise set down her fork. The room changed immediately. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Michael," she said, "your father taught you better than that." The smile vanished from his face. He tried to shrug it off. "I'm just saying Daniel's had some bad luck." Louise turned to him fully. "No," she said. "You're enjoying it." No one spoke after that, not for several seconds. Then Karen tried to change the subject, but the damage had already been done. Louise saw everything she needed to see that night, and so did I. When dinner ended, she asked me to walk her to her car. Outside, the November air was cold enough to sting. She unlocked the door, then stopped and looked at me. "You've had a hard year," she said. I smiled faintly. "That obvious?" To anyone with eyes. I nodded, not trusting myself to say much. Then she said something that seemed strange at the time. "Daniel, when people think you've lost everything, they often show you exactly who they are. Don't forget what you saw tonight." I told her I wouldn't. She studied my face for a moment, then she reached into her purse, took out a folded note, and placed it in my hand. "Keep this," she said. "And when the time comes, call the number." I looked down at it. A law office, no explanation, just a name and a phone number. "What is this?" "You'll know when you need it." Before I could ask anything else, she kissed my cheek, got into her car, and drove away. That was the last time I ever saw Aunt Louise alive. She died in her sleep 11 days later, and when the call came, I felt grief, yes, but I also felt something else, a strange, quiet certainty, because the last thing she gave me wasn't sentimental, it was deliberate. 3 days after her funeral, I called the number. And that was when my real story began. The law office was on the 12th floor of a glass building downtown, the kind of place where everything smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive paper. A receptionist led me into a corner office where a man in a dark blue suit stood to greet me. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, offering his hand. "I'm Thomas Bell. Your aunt asked me to expect your call." That sentence alone made my pulse quicken. He motioned for me to sit, then opened a file with my name already clipped to the front. For a moment, I just stared at it. My aunt had planned this. not casually, not emotionally, carefully. Mr. Bell removed a sealed envelope and slid it across the desk. In her instructions, he said, your aunt requested that this letter be given to you before anything else. My fingers shook slightly as I opened it. The letter inside was handwritten. Daniel, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I suspect the family is already behaving exactly as I expected. You have spent your life building, helping, and sacrificing for people who mistook your quietness for weakness. I have watched this for years. I also watched what happened when you fell, and I watched who smiled. That is why I made my decision with a clear mind. I am leaving the majority of my estate to you. Do not apologize for it. Do not divide it out of guilt. And do not let people who laughed at your pain suddenly call themselves family when money enters the room. With love. Louise. I must have read that letter 3 times. The room blurred a little by the end, not because of the money, not yet, but because someone had seen me clearly when almost no one else had. Mr. Bell waited until I folded the paper carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. Then he opened the file. Your aunt's estate, he said, has been appraised at just over $3.4 million. I froze. He continued, after charitable contributions, taxes, and administrative costs, the remaining amount to be distributed to you will be approximately $2.8 million. I actually laughed, not out of joy, out of disbelief. 6 months earlier, I'd been calculating whether I could afford groceries and gas in the same week. Now a lawyer in an office above the city was telling me that my aunt had left me more money than I had ever seen in one place in my life. There must be some mistake, I said quietly. There isn't. What about Michael? Karen? Eric? Your aunt made small gifts to a few relatives and employees, he said. But the majority beneficiary is you. I leaned back in the chair and stared out the window. Traffic moved below like lines of thought I couldn't quite catch. $2.8 million. It didn't feel real. Then Mr. Bell added something that made it feel even less real. Your aunt also left one additional instruction. I looked back at him. He smiled faintly. She requested that the family not be informed of the amount until after the will is read publicly. I should have felt guilty about what came next. But I didn't, because for the first time in a long time, life had handed me silence as an advantage. The reading of the will was scheduled for Friday. In the 3 days before it, not one person from my family called to ask how I was handling Louise's death. Not Michael, not Karen, not even Eric. But on Thursday night, Karen suddenly texted me, "Do you know if Aunt Louise left anything important? Not how are you? Not I miss her, just that, important." Money has a way of making people drop their masks too quickly. I wrote back only 3 words, "I'm not sure." That was enough to keep her curious. The next morning, the family gathered in the same law office. Michael arrived wearing a suit I'd only ever seen him wear to weddings and business pitches. Karen carried a notebook. Eric looked uncomfortable, which at least gave me some small relief that one person in the room still understood this wasn't supposed to feel like a treasure hunt. The reading began simply: a donation to the library, a contribution to an animal rescue, a gift to a former neighbor, then a few smaller personal bequests. Michael shifted in his seat. Karen leaned forward, and finally, "Mr. Bell came to the main estate, the majority of my estate," he read. "Including liquid assets, investments, and sale proceeds from real property, shall be distributed to my nephew, Daniel Whitmore." The silence that followed was beautiful, absolute, heavy, perfect. Karen was the first to speak. "What?" Michael blinked twice like he'd misheard. "To Daniel?" he said. Mr. Bell looked down at the page. "Yes." Karen's face drained of color. "That makes no sense." "It makes legal sense," Mr. Bell replied calmly. Michael turned toward me slowly. I didn't smile. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, because the truth was, no expression I could have made would ever be as satisfying as the silence itself. Karen tried again. There has to be some kind of explanation. There is, Mr. Bell said, and he lifted another paper. Your aunt left a personal statement to be read aloud if any beneficiary contested her decision. Then he began. Over the past year I observed which members of my family showed compassion. And which showed appetite. Daniel was the only one who never asked me what I was worth. He visited because I was family. He listened when I spoke. He helped when I needed it, and he never once treated my age as weakness. Those who laughed at him when he suffered may consider this the natural consequence of being seen clearly. By the time the letter ended, Michael looked like he'd been slapped, Karen looked furious, Eric looked ashamed, and me, I felt strangely calm, because something had shifted inside me. For months, I had felt like life was happening to me. That morning, for the first time, it felt like life had answered. Naturally, that should have been the end of it, but families like mine never let money leave a room quietly. The calls started before I even got to the elevator, Michael first, Karen second, both ignored, then texts, we need to talk, this isn't fair, Aunt Louise was manipulated, call me back. By evening, I had 13 missed calls. By the next morning, Michael was standing outside my apartment building. And that was when things got ugly. I saw Michael through the blinds before. I opened the door. He stood beside his SUV with his hands in his coat pockets, pacing the sidewalk like a man rehearsing outrage. For a second, I considered pretending I wasn't home, then I realized something. For months, I had been hiding from shame. I wasn't going to hide from them too. I opened the door. Michael turned quickly. There you are. I stayed in the doorway. What do you want? He looked offended by the question, which almost made me laugh. To talk. No, I said. You want money. Talking is just how you plan to get there. His jaw tightened. Daniel, don't do this. Do what? Act like this doesn't affect the whole family. That line was so predictable it might as well have come pre-printed on a greeting card for greedy relatives. The whole family? I asked. Interesting. I don't remember the whole family being very concerned when I lost my house. That was different. Was it? Michael exhaled sharply and tried a new tone, calmer now, almost reasonable. Aunt Louise wasn't in her right mind near the end. I looked at him for a long moment. Be careful, I said quietly. His eyes narrowed. You know what I mean. No, I replied. I know exactly what you mean. You're saying an old woman couldn't have made a decision you didn't like unless she was confused. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off, and that tells me everything I need to know. Michael stared at me, then laughed once. So that's it? You're just keeping all of it. The truth is, 6 months earlier, that question might have broken me. I might have explained myself. Defended myself. Tried to prove I wasn't selfish, but failure had burned that habit out of me. Yes, I said. He blinked. Yes. Yes. I'm keeping what she left me. Michael's face hardened instantly. Then don't expect this family to forget it. I almost answered, then I realized he'd accidentally given me a gift, because men like Michael always think exclusion is power. But what if being excluded from a family like ours was freedom? So I simply said, goodbye, Michael. And I closed the door. Karen tried a different approach. She didn't show up angry. She showed up crying. 2 days later she invited me to lunch and arrived 10 minutes late with red eyes and a tissue she barely used. I just hate what this is doing to us, she said. I stirred my coffee and waited. She spoke for 14 minutes before finally reaching the point. she and her husband were going through a difficult period. Their daughter's tuition was expensive. The cruise she'd once bragged about had somehow become non-refundable. Life was stressful. Family should support each other. I listened quietly. When she finished, I asked only one question: "Did you ever once come to that apartment to help me?" She stared at me. "What?" "When I lost my house. When Sandra left. When the business collapsed. Did you come to help?" Karen's expression changed immediately. "That's not fair." "It's exactly fair." She put down her cup. "So you're punishing us now?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm remembering." That sentence ended lunch faster than anything else could have. She left angry. I finished my coffee, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty afterward, because memory is not cruelty, it's protection. Eric was the last one to come. He arrived on a Sunday afternoon and looked so uncomfortable standing in my apartment that I almost felt sorry for him before he even spoke. "I'm not here for money," he said immediately. I believed him. That's why I invited him in. We sat across from each other at my little folding table, the same one Karen had silently judged weeks earlier. Eric rubbed his hands together and looked down. "I should have called more," he said. "When everything happened." I nodded, "Yes. You should have." He accepted that without argument. "That's on me," he said. I didn't know what to say. And then, the longer I waited, the worse it got. I studied him carefully. "You smiled when Michael mocked me." He shut his eyes briefly. "I know." There it was, not denial, not excuse, just truth, and because of that, I kept listening. "I'm ashamed of that," he said. I didn't think it was funny. I just didn't stop it. That may sound small to some people, but it mattered to me, because character is often measured less by perfection than by honesty. We talked for nearly 2 hours, about Sandra, about the business, about how far apart we had drifted. At the end, he stood and said, "I don't want anything from you, Dad. I just don't want this to be how we are." That sentence stayed with me after he left, not because it erased the past, it didn't, but because it was the first real thing anyone in my family had said to me since all of this began. 2 weeks later, the money officially cleared. I paid off every remaining debt, every last one, the tax liens, the business obligations, the legal balances, the credit accounts that had haunted my sleep. Then I did something my brother and sister would never understand. I didn't buy a sports car. I didn't book a luxury cruise. I didn't parade the money around like proof of victory. Instead, I bought back something else: dignity. I purchased a modest house with a wraparound porch on the edge of town. Not too large. Quiet. Solid. The kind of place built to last. I set aside money for retirement. I created a trust for Eric's children, if he ever had any, and I made a donation in Aunt Louise's name to the local library, because she had spent half her life there and once told me that books were the only inheritance nobody could steal. As for Michael and Karen, they stopped calling once they realized guilt wouldn't open my wallet. The silence after that was peaceful. Cleaner than grief, cleaner than anger, just space, useful space. A few months later, I stood on the porch of my new house and watched the sun sink behind the trees with a cup of coffee warming my hands, and I thought about everything that had happened: the collapse, the laughter, the humiliation, the lawyer's office, the reading of the will, the look on Michael's face when he heard the number, $2.8 million. People love stories like that because they think the money is the twist, but it wasn't. The real twist was this: I had already seen everyone clearly before the money arrived. The inheritance didn't reveal them, my suffering did, that was the gift hidden inside the pain. The money just confirmed what I already knew: people who laugh when you lose everything do not deserve a seat at your table when life gives something back, and sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't the dollars at all, it's the chance to rebuild your life without the people who were cheering for your collapse. My name is Daniel Whitmore. They laughed when I lost everything. Then I inherited $2.8 million. And in the end, the money changed my life, but the silence afterward, that's what saved it.